Bezat Hashem, today in Masechet Megilla, we're holding on the very bottom of Yadalit Amud Aleph, and we're going to learn today Yadalit Amud bot-14b. We're in the middle of a sugya where we spoke about yesterday that there were 7 neviot, there were 7 prophetesses historically. We went through a few of them, and we're going to continue on today with Abigail. Now this Abigail, she was a very interesting character in the Navi, in Shmuel Aleph. As we started yesterday, David HaMelech was on the run from Shaul, who wanted to kill him for many years. So one time, David HaMelech was traveling through an area where there was a very wealthy man whose name was Naval. This Naval, David sent a messenger to him to ask him, could I have some food, because Naval was making a big party. Naval refused, and because of that, David HaMelech felt like it was a mored b'malchut. He was like an affront to the king, and he was approaching Naval to kill him. Abigail was the wife of Naval, and she was a very intelligent woman, and she came to David to plead on behalf of her husband that he shouldn't kill her. Actually, eventually, she gives David food, and Naval realizes, and he goes into like a coma-like state for 10 days, and he eventually dies, and this Abigail ends up marrying David HaMelech. This is a very interesting storyline in Shmuel Aleph, very interesting. A lot more than what I just said, but that's the short story. In the storyline, we're going to see from the discussion that Abigail has when she comes to plead for Naval, that she prophesizes, and that's really why we're bringing this in. So the Gemara tells us like this. Abigail is the third to last line on Yadal Amud Aleph. Abigail dechtiv, how do we know Abigail was a prophetess? Because the pasuk in Shmuel Aleph tells us, Va'aya hi rochevet al chamor v'yoredet b'seiter ahar. It says she was riding on a donkey and she was descending in the seiter ahar. Now seiter means the private area of the mountain, or the closed area of the mountain. So the Gemara says, Besetar, what do you mean from the covered area of the mountain? Min army baile. It should say she descended from the mountain to David's camp. So Rabbi Bar Shmuel al iske dam haba min astarim. What it means is that she came to David HaMelech with the question about dam, about blood that comes from the private place. Meaning, she had a plan here. We'll see in a minute exactly what her strategy was. She wanted to catch David in a argument that he couldn't refuse. So she came with dam as if to ask him a question about nida. That's what it looked like she was doing. Natla dam atalo. So she showed him this dam and she asked him a question, is this tamer tahor? So Amrla, he said, B'chimar and dam balayla, it's nighttime. You can't ask questions about dam nida at night because you can't see it properly. In order to determine if it's tamer tahor, you have to be able to see the color. Amr Lo, she said back, you're also not allowed to adjudicate capital cases at night. So therefore, the same way you're not allowed to determine if this is dam nida, that's tamer tahor, you shouldn't be allowed to determine that my husband is chayav mita, and therefore at least push it off till the morning. So Amr Allah, turning to Yadal Amud bet, so David HaMelech said, you're wrong, because your husband is a rebellious person against the kingdom, and someone that rebels against the king does not require adjudication. The king can kill him how he sees fit. I'm a king, and therefore I don't need to judge him. So Amar Lo, she said back to David, Adayin Shaul Kayem. It's not true, because Shaul is still around. He's still the standing king. Your nature has not gone out into the world, meaning you are not known to be the king, yet you can't assess on yourself the status of Mored B'malchut, and therefore you can't kill him. Now David couldn't refuse this argument. So Amar Lai said to Abigail, Baruch ta'amechu brucha at. Blessed is your reasoning, and blessed are you, Asher kilitani hayom hazeh mivo b'damim, that you have prevented me, or you stopped me today from approaching bloods, and that's a plurality. So what is the idea? Damim tarti mashma, 2 bloods. What does it mean? So the Gemara is about to tell us, and again, we're going through this at face value. There's obviously a lot more to discuss, but what happened was, David saw her and he was so inspired by her beauty that he wanted to have relations with her. So the Gemara tells us, El melamed shegilta et shoka. You have to know what this means. There's a lot of them before we talk about this. She revealed her shoka, is her thigh. Ve'alach la'ora gimel parsaot. Literally it means he went he moved towards her 3 parsaot because of her beauty, the light of her, the radiance of her skin. Amarla, and he said to her, Hashmi'eni li, listen to me, means have relations with me. Amarlo, she said back, Lo tieh zot lecha lepoka. This shouldn't be a hindrance for you. This shouldn't be a stumbling block for you. So this is the key why we're bringing it in, actually. She stopped him from having relations with her, which is why he said the double bloods, meaning not only did you save me from the dam nida, which you showed me, but also shvichut damim, which is killing your husband, which you prevented that from. Both. The dam nida and also shvichut damim. But the point is, the reason we're bringing this whole story is zot, the fact that she said, this won't be a hindrance for you, that there would be a different situation where David would stumble. What is that referring to? The story of Bathsheba, where he took Bathsheba, was the wife of Uriah Hittite. We're not going to get it too much. But umaskana achihava, and that was actually the conclusion. This was the element of prophecy we find in this woman, Abigail, because she predicted a future event that David would indeed stumble with Bathsheba. Even though we know the Gemara in Ketuvot tells us, if you say you made a mistake, you're making a mistake. If you say it's chata, it's not true, but there was some element of error there. And then she continues and she said to David, my master's soul should be bound up in the bond of life. When she was leaving David, Amrale, she said to him, Hashem should be good to my master, and you should remember your maidservant. Amr Rav Nachman says, it's like people say, a woman, when she converses, she holds her spindle. Now, what it means in the context here is, she was planning for the future. Her husband was still alive, and yet she was saying, you'll remember me, meaning there was a degree here that she was planning is if my husband should die, then I'll be available for marriage. And actually that's what ended up happening. Ikidamri, a similar expression people say, Shapil va'azil baravuza, the goose stoops and it walks, ve'enoi mitaifi, but its eyes gaze afar, look afar. Meaning to say is, she was already predicting about the future. But the point we bring the story in is to show she was a Neviah, prophetess. Now Huldah was the second to last one on the list here? Hold on.
There's another one, I think.
After one more. Esther, exactly. So Huldah, where do we know Huldah was a prophetess? So this is in Melachim Bet. Tichtiv Melachim Bet. The pasuk tells us like this, that the Jews at the time, let me check the story right here. Yeah. Yoshua was the king of the Jewish people at the time. Yoshua HaMelech. He instructed repairs of the Beit HaMikdash, and when they were repairing, they found a scroll of the Torah that was rolled to a very scary section of the Torah about the destruction, about the Churban. So they wanted to send a message to the Navi to figure out what is Hashem telling us with this finding. Now, as we're going to find, it would appear that they sent the message to Huldah instead of Yirmiyah. Now, Yirmiyah was the great Navi of the time. Huldah was a prophetess, but she wasn't the leader of Nevi'im at the time. So the Gemara says, you see, the fact they sent her showed that she was a Nevi'ah. Nonetheless, it's going to challenge this, because if Yirmiyah was there, why would they have sent the message to Huldah, not to Yirmiyah? So the pasuk says, Vayelech Chilkiyahu, HaKohen, V'Achikam, V'Achbor, V'Gomer. Chilkiyahu and Achikam, Achbor, these people sent a message to Huldah asking what is the idea of this finding that we found the Torah scroll rolled to the Tochacha, to the scary sections of Galut.
When did she leave? After Abigail?
This was after, yes.
Okay.
Huldah is after Abigail, because Huldah is when there was a Beit HaMikdash already. David HaMelech was before the Beit HaMikdash, right?
And then Esther, this is the last one.
Esther was the last one. It seems to be chronological.
Okay.
It seems to be chronological.
Yes, Sarah, Miriam,
yes, I would say they are chronological. Let me just see to confirm 1 second. Yeah, Sarah's first. Miriam was the sister of Moshe. Tvorah is the Shoftim. Chana is before the Beit HaMikdash, right? Abigail is, you would imagine that they're chronological. They seem to be chronological.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, they do seem to be chronological. It's true. Okay. So the pasuk tells Gomer means they sent this message. Clearly, she was a neviah. But the Gemara asks, if Yirmiyah was indeed the standing prophet, the significant prophet of the day, So how was she able to prophesize in his place? Meaning, how could she step up and be involved in prophecy in this regard? It's almost a disrespect towards Yirmiyah, who was the preeminent prophet of the time. Second? Yeah.
The Gadol Navi.
Exactly. Exactly, literally, yeah. Navi Gadol, I guess. So Amri Be'era Mishmei Derav Chulda Krovat Yirmiyah Ita V'lo Ava Makbir Aleha. Chulda was a relative of Yirmiyah, so he didn't have any issues with her doing this. It was a personal favoritism. The Yoshias, the Gemara says, okay, so I understand how she was able to prophesize and accept this instruction or accept this question. But for Yoshia Gufei, Heichi Shavik Yirmiyahu Meshadr Legaba, why would Yoshio, the king, send this message to her instead of sending it to Yirmiyah? So Amri Devira Bishila Mipnei Shanashim Rachmaniyotin. This is a very interesting idea. Women naturally have more mercy. Now there is an element of interpretation, of prophecy, that is personally based. So therefore, if they would have sent the message to Yirmiyah, perhaps it would have been a harsher interpretation. Sending the message to a woman, to Chulda, would have been naturally a more merciful interpretation. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Yirmiyah lo hava hatam. So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, actually, Yirmiyah wasn't there. He was busy on a mission. Shalach lachzir aseret hashvatim. Very interesting. In the days of Sancheiriv, the king of Ashur, the 10 tribes of the northern region of Israel, Shomron, of Israel, were exiled. So Yirmiyah, the Navi, went to bring back those 10 tribes. He was busy on a mission, and that's why they sent the message to Chulda and not to him. How do we know that he indeed brought those 10 tribes back? Because the pasuk in Yecheskel tells us, Ki hamocher el hamemkar lo yashuv. It says, the seller to his sale, it will not return at Yovel. Now, this is a pasuk in Yecheskel, which seems to be after the 10 tribes had already been exiled. Yeah, Rashi says this was between Galut Yechonia, which is the first wave of exile, and the destruction of Yerushalayim, which we spoke about before. So what the Gemara says is like this. He was saying that Yovel would be Batel in the future, that Yovel wouldn't continue to exist for fields to return to their original owners. The problem is, Efsher Yovel Batel, it was already Batel, because we know if you don't have the majority of the tribes in Israel, so then there's no Yovel. And he's predicting in the future it's going to be Batel. How could the Navi predict that it's going to be Batel? It teaches us, it must be Yirmiyah brought back those 10 tribes, and then Yovel restarted, and only in the future would it be again nullified when the Jews are exiled. And the Gemara continues and tells us, Yoshio ben Ammon malach alein. Yoshio, the king of the son of Ammon, ended up ruling over the all 12 tribes. Tichtiv, like it says, Melachim bet, Vayomer. This is in a story there. It says Yoshio went to a place of Beit El, and he said he saw a certain marker of a grave. And it says, Vayomer ma tzion alaz asher ani ro'eh. He said to the people there, what is this marker that I see? Vayomer elav, and they said to him, Anshe, the people of the city said, Hakever ha'isha Elokim asher ba miYehuda. This is the grave of a man of God that came from Yehuda. Vayikra tadvarim ha'ele. He read certain things. Asher asita ala mizbeach beBeit El, that you've done on the mizbeach in Beit El. Now, Beit El is an area in the jurisdiction of Yisrael, of the northern region, which is not under Yehuda, where Yoshio was the king. So the Gemara says the fact that he's having this conversation, implying that he also ruled that area, it must be he ruled over all 10 tribes. What is the relationship with the king of Yehuda and the northern region of Israel? Yoshio ruled over them, meaning he eventually was a ruler over all 12 tribes. Nachman says you have another source that the Jews had returned, actually, the 12 tribes, because it says, Gam Yehuda shat kitzir lecha, Yehuda, the harvest will come back to you, or there'll be a great harvest, Beshuv Yishvut Ami, when my nation returns from captivity. This is a reference here that Yehuda is a reference to Yoshio. Kitzir is that the Jewish people will return back, meaning is that he ruled over the other 10 tribes as well when they returned in the days of Yirmiyah. Fine. Esther. Let's go to the last one. Finish up here. Esther, you woke up a little late today. Esther. Esther was the last of the 7 prophetesses. We said she prophesied as well. So where do we know that she was a prophetess? It says, Vayi bayom hashlishi. We know that when she was going to go in and plead on behalf of the Jewish people, she went in with a plan, but it says, "Vayi bayom hashlishi," she went in on the third day to the king, "Vatilbash Esther malchut," and she wore malchut. Now, it doesn't say she wore clothing, royal clothing. It just says she wore malchut. So the Gemara says, "Bigdei malchut mibaile." Really, it should have said clothing of royalty. Ela shalavashta ruach hakodesh. Rather, what it means is that she was encloaked. She was clothed with divine inspiration, with ruach hakodesh. K'tiv hacha, and we'll speak more about this later. K'tiv hacha, because it says here, "Vatilbash," it says she was enclothed. V'chtiv atam, and it says elsewhere in Divrei Yamim, "V'ruach lavishat amasai," a spirit enclothed amasai v'gomer. Meaning, we find that this idea of being lavush, dressed, could be referred to ruach hakodesh.
Amasai is what?
Amasai was a person, I believe, in the army of, it was a soldier in the army of, I think it was David HaMelech, if I remember correctly. Yeah, but it says he was enclothed, Amasai. It was a person's name. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman, Lo ya'a yehiruta lenashi. This is a very controversial statement, you could say. Prominence is not appropriate for women. Women shouldn't have positions of power. Why? Because Tarti Nashi Yahiran Havyan, because two women here who were prophetesses, by the way, and they had these high positions, Visanyan Shmayayu, and their names are despised. Chadash Maziborta, one is called a bee, Devora is a bee actually. V'chadash Ma Karkushta, and one is called a weasel. Cholda is a weasel. A weasel is this little creature that lives in the ground.
That's why there is no woman called Cholda.
Cholda, exactly, they don't name their name, but Devora you have a lot. Zibur Daktiva, now where do we find that because they had these positions, or seemingly, even though these were tzidkaniyot, these were neviyot, these were very righteous women, but we do find that they acted in a way that was haughty, so that their position got to them. I mean, what I would just wonder is, you find many men also, because of their positions of prominence, they also act in very haughty ways. So, you have to know exactly what?
It comes with it.
It comes with it. But the Gemara relates stories where it seems like they acted in a haughty way because of their position. So it says, Ziborta K'tiva, regarding Devora, it says, Vatishlach Vatikra, Devora, it says, Vatishlach Vatikra LeBarak. So what happened was, she wanted to send a message to Barak, who I believe was her husband, but she was also the general of the war. And it says she sent a message to him, meaning she sent a messenger to relay a message. She didn't go herself, which would have been more respectful. Ve'ilu ihi lo azla legabe. She did not go herself. And Karkush Daktiva, regarding Cholda, it says, Imru le'ish. It says, say to the man. Velo amra, Imru lamelech. She should have said, say to the king Yoshiyahu. That would have been more appropriate. She said, just say to the man. So we find that to some degree, they acted in a haughty way, and therefore, they say prominence is not ideal for women. To know exactly what the pshat in that is, but okay. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Chulda mibnei banav shel Yehoshua haita. This Chulda, this prophetess, was a descendant of Yehoshua ben Nun. Because it says here by Chulda, it says ben Chorchas. It calls Chulda the descendant of Chorchas. This person. And it says by Yehoshua, B'timnat Cheres, he was buried in a place called Timnat Cheres. So Cheres is used in both contexts. It sounds like they were related. The problem is, Eiteve Rav Ina Saba Rav Nachman. Rav Ina Saba asked the question to Rav Nachman. The Braita says, Shmona Nevi'im Vehem Kohanim, that there were 8 Nevi'im who were also Kohanim, Yatz'u me Rachav HaZonah, who descended from Rachav HaZonah. We know Rachav HaZonah was the woman who protected the spies of Israel that Yehoshua had sent in, which was Kalev and Pinchas. And she hid them from the king of Yericho in the beginning of Sefer Yehoshua. So 8 Nevi'im, and she eventually converted and married actually into the Jewish people. We'll see in a minute. But there
was a prostitute, no?
She was Zonah, prostitute. It's a debate if she was a prostitute or if she was an innkeeper who provides mizonot, food. It goes two shitot. Could be both also. So 8 Nevi'im and Kohanim descended from Rachav HaZonah. The Elohein, these are the Nevi'im and Kohanim. It says, and now these are father-son combinations. Neriah and Baruch. So Neriah was the father, Baruch was the son. So these are all Kohanim who are prophets also. Viseriah and Machasya. And also Seriah was the son, Machasya was the father. Yirmiyah, Chilkiah. Yirmiyah was the son, Chilkiah was the father. Chanamel Vishalum. And Chanamel, who was the son, and Shalom was the father. But the point is, what do you see? Rabbi Yehuda adds, Af Chulda Hanviya mibnei banei asher Rachav hazona ita. Also, Chulda was a descendant of Rachav hazona. Because K'tiv Acha, it says by Chulda, ben Tikva, it uses this word that she was the descendant of Tikva. K'tiv Atam, and it says by Rachav, et Tikvat Chut Hashani, that she lowered the spies out of the window with this red rope. So you see it used the same word tikva. But what's the kasha? So you see that this Chulda was a descendant of Rachav, and also you just finished saying that she was a descendant of Yehoshua. So Amar Leitz, Rav Nachman said back to Rav Eina, he says back, Eina Saba, v'amri la patya uchma. Either he said Eina Saba, or he said black vessels. Blackened vessels was a positive expression, actually. Meaning to say is that you were the son of great ones. I believe that's how this is explained over here. 1 second. Kli Shachor.
It says it's...
yeah, the Shevach. I believe it was a positive thing. I think it was a positive connotation, no? Miniu minach testayim. Between the two of us, we can conclude Shmaita, the conclusion that we say as follows. The Igaryo, what happened was, Rachav converted, Psukim and Yehoshua refer to this. Vinasva Yehoshua, and Yehoshua ended up marrying her. And what ended up happening then was, Chulda is a descendant of both Yehoshua and Rachav hazona, because Yehoshua married her, and then Chulda was their descendant.
Yeah, it's a sign of humility.
Humility, yeah.
The black vase.
Blackened vessels.
Yeah, blackened vessels.
Blackened vessels. Says the Gemara, but wait a second. Umi havule zar ali Yehoshua. Did Yehoshua really have children? V'achtib, we know the pasuk tells us in Divrei Yamim, Nun beno, when it records the descendants of the generations, it says Nun was his son, whoever Nun's father was. Yehoshua beno, Yehoshua was the son of Nun, and it stops there. It doesn't say there were any more sons. So the Gemara says it sounds like Yehoshua didn't have descendants. The answer is no. Benilo havule, bantan havule. He didn't have sons, but he did have daughters, and Chulda ended up to be a descendant of Yehoshua. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll pick up with Tetvav tomorrow.
Okay.
It's a tremendous lesson in the power of Teshuvah.
Tomorrow?
No, about Rachav. Is that the Psukim in Yehoshua tell us that she was, like you said, a prostitute, doing the worst kinds of averot for 40 years, the Psukim tell us. And then, a moment later, as Rashi explains, she had some sort of a prophetic vision already. It's like, what happened there exactly? So the answer is, if a person really does teshuvah, they can change things in the most drastic... Transform. It's totally transformative. Changes the person altogether. And that's what she ends up marrying the Gadol Ador, the leader of the generation. You see the drastic distinction that exists there.
When Hashem puts his hand on you, you can become anything.
Yeah, now that requires a tremendous amount of effort.
Exactly,
Obviously, it's not like...
You do half of the way, but if you do it,
Exactly.
you will do the second half. Bezrat Hashem. Have a good day. Thank you.